I've been a police officer for 37 years, and I was elected as King County Sheriff last year. During my career, I've investigated everything from shoplifts to homicides. I've also spent almost 12 years as a narcotics detective. My experience shows me that the war on drugs has been a failure. We have not significantly reduced demand over time, but we have incarcerated generations of individuals, the highest incarceration rate in the world. So the citizens of the state of Washington decided it was time to try something new, and in November of 2012 they passed Initiative 502, which legalized recreational amounts of marijuana and at the same time created very strict rules and laws. I was a strong supporter of Initiative 502 last year, and I remain a strong supporter today. There are several reasons for that support. Most of all, I support 502 because that's what the people want. They voted for legalized marijuana. We, the government, have failed the people, and now they want to try something else. Too often the attitude of the police is, we're the cops and you're not, don't tell us how to do our job. That's the wrong attitude, and I refuse to fall into that trap. While the title of this hearing is the conflict between state and federal marijuana laws, I don't see a huge conflict. The reality is we do have complementary goals and values. We all agree we don't want our children using marijuana. We all agree we don't want impaired drivers. We all agree we don't want to continue enriching criminals. Washington's law honors those values by separating consumers from gangs and diverting the proceeds from the sale of marijuana toward furthering the goals of public safety. In legalizing and regulating the possession and sale of marijuana, is it a better alternative? I think it is, but I'm willing to be proven wrong. The only way we will know, however, is if we are allowed to try. DOJ's recent decision provides clarity on how we in Washington can continue to collaborate with the federal government to enforce our drug laws while at the same time respecting the will of the voters. It's a great step, but more needs to be done. And I hate to beat a dead horse here, but for example, we are still limited by not knowing the role of banking institutions as we go forward. Under federal law, it is illegal for banks to open checking, savings, or credit card accounts for marijuana businesses. The result is that the marijuana stores will be operated as cash only, creating two big problems for me as a police officer. Cash-only businesses are prime targets for armed robberies, and cash-only businesses are very difficult to audit, leading to possible tax evasion, wage theft, and diversion of the resources we need to protect public safety. I am simply asking the federal government to allow banks to work with legitimate marijuana businesses who are licensed under this new state law. In closing, let me make one thing abundantly clear. What we have in Washington State is not the Wild, Wild West. And as sheriff, I am committed to continued collaboration with the DEA, FBI, and DOJ for robust enforcement of our respective drug laws. For example, I have detectives right now that are assigned to federal task forces, including a DEA HIDTA task force. It's been a great partnership for many years, and that partnership will continue. Furthermore, the message to my deputies has been very clear. You will enforce our new marijuana laws. You will write somebody a ticket for smoking in public. You will enforce age limits. You will put unlicensed stores out of business. In other words, the King County Sheriff's Office will abide by the standards and laws voted on and adopted by the citizens of the state of Washington and the guidance provided by the Department of Justice on August 29th. Mr. Chairman, I say to you and the members of this committee, I do appreciate the deference the federal government has shown to my constituents, and I look forward to continuing that cooperation. Thank you. I think there's some urban myths that are floating around out there that Seattle is going to turn into the Starbucks of marijuana, for example. That 500 or 50,000 people were all smoking at Hemp Fest in downtown Seattle a couple of weeks ago. That there's going to be gummy bears infused with marijuana. That's just not going to happen in the state of Washington. The big business is not going to take over the marijuana business, the legal marijuana business in the state of Washington. There's no vertical integration allowed. The processors and the growers of marijuana cannot own retail stores. Only 3 retail stores can be owned by one owner, for example. No advertising, security systems, lots and lots of protections in place to make sure marijuana is not sold, marketed, to people under the age of 21 or used by people under the age of 21 in any way, shape, or form. We realize what's going on. We are going to avoid that when it comes to legalized marijuana for recreational purposes.
Thank you.
Sheriff Urquhart, let me ask you, are you familiar with the 8 federal interest areas?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with those?
Yes.
From a law enforcement perspective, you think that they're adequate and appropriate?
Absolutely. And we will have no problem meeting those at all. Now, some of them don't apply necessarily straight to the sheriff's office, but many of them do. But from what I've seen from the regulatory standpoint that the state is enacting, I think it's going to work out very well. I have no problem with those whatsoever, and I thank the Justice Department for coming forward with those when they did.
And presumably, given all your years in law enforcement and your years as a narcotics investigator, you have worked with the federal government on federal investigations in the past in various capacities, correct? That's
correct. And my detectives are doing that currently, yes.
And are there current activities?
Yes.
Basically in the same areas that these 8 federal interest areas provide for, or do you see any areas of activity that you're undertaking now that would stop?
No, not at all. In fact, a week ago, we assisted with serving several federal search warrants and confiscated $193,000, several guns, heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana, and we do that all the time. And that's not going to change. Our cooperation with the federal government is not going to change one iota because of Initiative 502.
And so by limiting it itself to those 8 areas of federal interest, you don't see that reducing the federal law enforcement footprint in the state of Washington in any significant respect?
Absolutely not.
Very good.
Back to Sheriff Urquhart, because you've heard what Dr. Sabet had said and others, and I'm interested in your insight. 35 years in law enforcement, significant part of that is a narcotic detective. You obviously have, I mean, your sheriff's department is larger than all our law enforcement in Vermont put together. So those who criticize your state's initiative was asked whether legalizing small amounts of marijuana could have resulted in increased drug driving or illegal use by minors, cross-border trafficking. You've heard all those concerns. How do you address that from a public safety point of view?
I think what we need to do is continue doing what we've been doing all along, which is really robust enforcement. This is not going to change a whole lot. The rules that are in place or about to be in place in the state of Washington put a limit on the amount of marijuana that can be produced. And with the idea that they're only going to match demand, they're not going to produce enough so it can be exported to other states. Now, that's not to say illegal marijuana grows, like I'm sure is going on in Colorado, are not going to be exported. But we can go after those, and we will go after those. We don't expect what's grown legally under the new system to be exported. As far as driving, under this new law, we now have a way to go after people that are driving under the influence of marijuana. In the past, it was very, very difficult to get a conviction. Now we have a per se standard of 0.5 nanograms, thank you, nanograms per milliliter of blood. Now we have a standard that we can use, just like we use 0.08 for driving under the influence of alcohol. We never had that before. So one of the things that I'm doing is retraining many of my deputies so they can be drug recognition experts. So when they go to the scene of a suspected drunk driver that's under the influence of narcotics, whether there's any narcotic or marijuana, they can test that driver to see if they need to arrest that person and take them in for a blood test. So
Let me ask
something
you,
brand new.
I'm not even sure we have that standard in my state of Vermont. I recall the frustration as a prosecutor when I was there because we did not have a standard we could use. Alcohol was easy. We had a very strict standard. So your commitment is to enforce the law as it is in your state. Are there areas where the federal government can help you?
Absolutely. And I think the
clarifying letter that came out on August 29th helped immensely. It removed the uncertainty that we had. It knows that they're going to allow the citizens of the state of Washington what they want, and what they want is legalized marijuana, and that's a very big deal. I think it's going to take the criminal element as best we can out of the sale of marijuana, and that really was brought home to me just 2 nights ago when I was here in Washington, D.C. My chief of staff here in the front row, Chris Berenger, and I went out to dinner. We went to old Abbott's Grill, just 2 or 3 blocks from the White House. We're walking back to our hotel. It's about 9 o'clock at night, but it's dark. We saw 2 gentlemen, young gentlemen, college age, walked up to a man standing on the corner and says, "Hey, can I get some weed around here?" Now, they certainly didn't come up to us, but they did go up.
I take it you were not in your uniform.
I was not wearing this outfit, no. But they did go up to the most sketchy guy on the block, to try and buy weed. That is going to go away in Washington, because they can go into a store, not a Starbucks store, they can go into a freestanding store and buy their marijuana legally. So they know what they're going to get, they know what the price is going to be, they don't have to go to that criminal element on the street corner at 9 o'clock at night and solicit somebody to sell them marijuana. Our 502 is going to eliminate all of that, and that's a huge step forward.